Hi, I'm Teo Nikolakis with Audioholics, and in this episode, I'm going to be talking to you about tips and tricks to make sure you get the most out of your microphone placement for room correction solutions like Anthem ARC, Audyssey, and Dirac Live. So stay tuned, and I'll be right back. Welcome back. We're going to talk about how now you can get the perfect microphone measurement locations for your Audyssey, Dirac, and Anthem ARC Genesis. So let's get started. There are 6 parts to this tutorial, and you can feel free to click in the YouTube description below and you can jump to any chapter that you'd like. The parts are: part 1, we're going to do some myth busting, and we're going to talk about some best practices for microphone locations and placement, so you want to stay tuned for that. Part 2 is then going to be the all-important microphone stand. This is going to be an essential section that we're going to talk about and how important that can be to your calibrations. The third part, we're going to do a deep dive into ARC Genesis and microphone placements. Then that's going to be followed by Audyssey, then Dirac, and then finally we're going to do multiple rows. And that's important. If you have multiple rows, we're going to dispel some misnomers and really talk about some best practices. And then finally, some important final thoughts. So let's get going. Room correction reminders. Just some expectations for success. Number 1, great sound always starts with great equipment and also great source material. That's an important factor. Number 2, proper positioning of your main speakers and your subs. Number 3, taking proper measurements during calibration, which is why you're here and what we're going to be talking about. Then next is to make sure that you have a good treated and sounding room. It doesn't have to be over treated, but at least to make sure you don't have a lot of slap echo and other things. Other expectations that we have is that room correction will not, and this is an important point, make an $800 pair of speakers sound like a $20,000 pair of speakers. Doesn't matter what you may read or hear online. That is total baloney. It's not true. So let's start with some expectations there. Room correction will not compensate for poor speaker placement setup or poor subwoofer setup. So you want to make sure that you have your mains positioned properly to your main listening position, follow best practices. You don't want to substitute room correction for room treatment. They're not the same thing. They do very different tasks. And if you read online that, oh, all you need to do is have room correction, you don't need to bother with room treatment, that's another baloney thing. Now, here are the forbidden rules of taking measurements. You shall not, under any circumstances, hold the microphone in your hand while seated in the main listening position. That's not what you're going to do. You're going to get terrible results. Number 2, don't measure the RSP, the reference seating position. This is also called the main listening position. Measurement position number 1, over and over and over and over. No, doing 5 measurements there in the middle or 8 measurements with Audyssey is not going to give you better results. It's going to give you worse results. Don't do it. Next is try to be as quiet as possible. So therefore, don't talk. Have fans running, AC running, or anything else that makes noise during a calibration. Then don't stand between the speakers and the calibration as you're doing it. Make sure you have your computer or your position that is outside the boundary of where that measurement's taking place. And then be sure to measure, this is really important, do not measure within 3 feet of a room boundary. So if your couch is here, you want to make sure that you're measuring 3 feet away from the couch so you don't get that boundary reinforcement. That goes for side walls as well, okay? Then finally, please don't make your family sit in the seats while you're taking calibration. That doesn't do anything. It doesn't make it better, so just don't do that. Now, our focus for expectations will be the 3 packages of Anthem ARC Genesis, Audyssey, and Dirac Live. We will not be covering Trinov or Room Perfect in this. Now, what you'll notice as we go through the different packages is that the patterns are similar, but they're not identical. And that's an important point. So you want to do the pattern that best matches the software solution that you're using. And what you are going to see, however, is that the concepts are indeed the same. So they're measuring around the listening area or a single row. All solutions do want to have varying height after the main listening position. So even though it shows a two-dimensional image, you want to make sure that you're varying the height a little bit at each position relative to the main listening position. You'll see that in the tutorials, as I'll actually show you in a sec. And then finally, trust the software, especially if you're inexperienced. A lot of research, a lot of study has gone into this, and thinking that someone is smarter than what the software is going to give by default usually ends up making a mess of things. So give it a go from there. Let's talk about the stand. That is one of the most important things, in my opinion, that happens when you need to do a calibration. Now, Audyssey happens to come with a paper stand, and my recommendation is that you throw that right out. Dirac, depending on the solution that you're getting, sometimes you'll get no stand, or if it comes bundled with a U-mic, you might get a small stand like this, or if you're an Anthem user, at least you get a stand like this. So I want to tell you a little bit about what I use and what I would recommend if you want to get out of the most for your calibrations. What I've been using for many, many years is a full microphone stand with a boom arm. And this to me is one of the most important things that you can do to start whenever you're doing any sort of calibration. The reason for that is you're not subject to trying to have a little rinky-dink stand like this sitting on a chair, and even the Anthem solution, which I'm going to talk to you in a little bit, which is pretty good, sometimes has trouble with height. So with the boom arm, what you can do is you can extend the microphone out, you can slide it back in, and the most important thing for me is I have a single pivot point with the base, and that allows me to then move the microphone in an equidistant manner to make sure I get all of my measurement positions. So here's the other advantage as well. I'm just going to disconnect the U-mic here. And that is how you actually do your measurement. So when it comes to Audyssey, for example, what I have done is I have built this tool that is pretty simple. I have a dowel that is right here, and then all I have is a threaded screw that fits the Audyssey microphone. And then all I do is I put the dowel here, and then I open it up. And now I have holes for all my microphone positions, and that way I can do a 5-point Audyssey calibration without having to move anything. Let me show you the other thing that I've done here with this dowel is right in the middle here, what I've done is I've created a square and then marked the 90-degree and 45-degree angles. And then what I've done is I've put arrows as well, so that way I know from the tool's perspective exactly where I'm lined up. So if I want to do a 90-degree, and then if I want to do some of those extreme positions, the other measurements, I can then collapse the tool to be at the 45-degree position. So this makes it super, super easy for me to conduct an Audyssey calibration. All I have to do is make sure that I have an adequate grip here, and then I make sure that the arm is weighted appropriately so it doesn't collapse. And then what I do is just take my Audyssey microphone, and then it fits right into the threaded top. As you'll see, I won't do it all the way. I use a threaded screw to secure the microphone to the arms, and then what I'll do is I'll add a counterweight in order to keep the tool level. You can also use a single 1/4-inch piece of oak or maple and then drill a hole in the middle, and then likewise a hole on each end if that's easier, and then just rotate that around with the microphone stand. So that's a really cool way that I found to make sure that I'm getting equidistant measurement with all of my Audyssey calibrations. The other thing that I want to mention, if you're an Anthem user, is you have a real advantage with the smaller stand that comes with Audyssey. with Anthem ARC. Let me show you that right here and what I do. So if I have a low back chair that I'm doing a calibration with, I will use the Anthem ARC stand that comes with an Anthem product, and you'll see it goes up to a decent height. And what I did is I went to a local music store, you can also get these online, and I will get an extra microphone stand, and there's a reason why that I'll tell you. First of all, this is really easy as well. I got to give a lot of credit to Anthem for providing a real microphone stand with the calibrations. But if you're an Anthem ARC user, you'll know that the latest version of ARC does an amazing job with multi-sub and especially phase alignment of the sub to the mains. So once you're done with your main calibration, it then says, okay, put your microphone back to the main listening position, and then you do a measurement from there. So here's what I did, is in order to do the main listening position consistently, I purchased an extra microphone holder right here, and then I screwed it on top of the thread on the microphone stand, and therefore I'm guaranteed that anytime I'm doing my main listening position measurement, and therefore the phase alignment measurement, I don't have to move the microphone stand. So that way I put it in the seat, I put the microphone down in here, I then rotate the arm, do all of my measurements with Anthem ARC, and then boom, I put the microphone there. Now you're probably thinking is, well, gee, what do you do if you're trying to measure a seat or a larger area? What I'll do is I'll usually keep this guy right here in the main listening position, and then I will supplement with this guy here. So that way I'm ensured that I'm always keeping my microphone that has for the main listening position and for the phase alignment right there in the main listening position, and it hasn't been moved. So that to me is one of the first and most important things that you can do as an enthusiast or even as a professional. Make sure you have the right stand for the right job and the right tool. This is convenient, but it just doesn't cut it. And I understand why the paper stand comes with Audyssey, but you've got to go to something that's a little bit more professional. The next thing has to do with microphones themselves. Now, if you're an Audyssey user, you may want to consider upgrading to a calibrated microphone. You can buy this on Amazon. I think it's something like $79, something like that. And this will provide a slightly more accurate reading of your measurements, especially if you're using Audyssey Multi-QX, that's the PC version. So that would be the other thing that I recommend. So if you're using the PC version especially, you probably want to upgrade your microphone. Now, when it comes to Dirac Live, sometimes you get the little hockey puck style microphone. I would suggest that you upgrade to a U-mic, and that way you're getting a real calibrated microphone that you can use with a proper microphone stand. The thing to remember if you're using a U-mic is that there are two calibration files. One is 0 and the other is 90 degrees. You want to make sure that you're loading the 90-degree file and you have the microphone pointed up. A lot of people do this, and that's not what you want to do, especially when you're doing a home theater calibration. So the 90-degree calibration with the microphone pointed up. If you are an Anthem ARC user, the great news is it already comes with a calibrated microphone. And if you have one of the new AVM, the 70, the 90, or the new AVRs, the microphone is actually directional. So you're going to see a dot on the front of the microphone. That should be pointed towards the front of the room, towards a center channel speaker. And that way, Anthem ARC will be able to do a better job, especially if you want to calibrate above 5 kilohertz. Anthem ARC Genesis. So the RSP, or again, the reference seating position, is the most important first measurement point. You want to do that at ear height. The second thing is you want to vary the microphone height a few inches after the reference seating position. And you want to do a minimum of 5 positions, and they're going to be in an X pattern. You don't really need to do more than 5 with Anthem ARC. It does a fantastic job with those 5 positions. And you want to make the measurements above and below the RSP. What I typically do is I use what I would call circular staircase, where I'll do the second position maybe a little bit lower, then a little higher, 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 all the way around. And I'll show you that in the tutorial right after this segment. And then you do want to note, and you'll see that in a quick second, that there's an additional setup that you want to do for phase calibration after you have completed the main 5-point measurement. Therefore, you want to have a mechanism to ensure that you're putting the microphone back at the main listening position, that reference seating position at the same height. And I like to use the included stand that comes with Anthem ARC to do that. And you'll see that again in the tutorial where I talk about the stands. And then finally, if you are near a room boundary, Anthem does have a recommendation for your ARC Genesis calibrations. So this is what the pattern looks like. And again, you want to measure 3 feet away from a boundary. So whether that's going to be a right wall, a left wall, or a wall behind the seating position, and you really don't want to go to extreme angles either. So just follow the pattern outlined, and then you can do the remaining measurements from there. So here's Anthem ARC Genesis. So how about a calibration with Anthem ARC? Now, Anthem ARC Genesis wants you to use 5 microphone positions. Right here I have the main listening position, and the thing to emphasize with ARC Genesis and the calibrated mic that comes with it is it's a directional microphone. So there's a dot on the microphone. There's a sticker that tells you that's what should be pointing directly to the front of the room towards the center channel speaker and perpendicular with your television or display to ensure that you're getting the proper frequency adjustment if you should choose to do above 5 kilohertz. We typically don't recommend that, but that's what you would do here. So I would take my first measurement at the main listening position. Then what I do is I go to position 2, 3, 4, 5, and what I do is I start with this position lower, slightly higher, higher, and highest is what I'll do here. So let me show you how I'll do that. One of 2 ways. If you have a boom mic, you can just extend the arm out, not that far out, right? So then I'll take the microphone stand here, I'll put it in front, and then you want to make sure when you're doing the front of the measurement that the microphone is visible over the top of your seating area. Now, if you have a low back couch, it's not a problem, but if you have theater seating, you do want to be aware of that. You want to have line of sight with all your speakers if you can. So again, make sure that the microphone is pointing to the front. You're going to have that over there. So then I'll do a measurement point down about here. Then I'll move it over here. I'll raise it up a little bit. And then what I'll do is I'll move the boom mic over to the back. And then I'll do the final 2 positions, 4 and 5, ensuring that the microphone is pointed here. And then finally, over here. I typically like to do about 24 inches from the main listening position. So you want to use that slightly elevating pattern. Maybe you want to do anywhere between 6 to 12 inches from bottom to top. In a similar vein, you want to measure the area around the main listening position. If you're not satisfied with the way that this calibration comes out and you have multiple rows, you can certainly do a few more measurements, but I would really caution against doing more measurements thinking that it's better. Anthem ARC Genesis does such an incredible job with 5 measurement points to really analyze your listening space and give you the best calibration possible. Audyssey. Audyssey is such a great tool, and especially the Multi-QX PC software version has taken Audyssey to the next level. But the measurement concepts are indeed the same. So the first thing is, want to make sure you get that RSP, that reference seating position, at ear height where the microphone is. Number two, you want to vary the microphone height a few inches up or down depending on the seating positions after the reference seating position. Number three, do not, and I emphasize do not, do more than 10 measurements. Audyssey really does a great job with 8. That's what's recommended. And even Audyssey will tell you between 8 and 10, doing more than 10 typically doesn't do anything better. In fact, you can make the results worse. And then finally, just in case you're interested, Multi-QX, the PC version of the software, supports up to 32 measurement positions. Here's what I do for an Audyssey measurement. I use this tool that I've designed and built for my Audyssey calibrations. And as you can see, it's just two very simple pieces of wood. It's a 1/2 inch piece of oak with a dowel and a threaded screw in the middle. And then what I'll do is I will put the main listening position microphone measurement right here. Once that is done, I'll then follow the pattern of what to do with a calibration. So Audyssey wants you to do position 2 here, let's say. So then I'll take a screw, feed it through the hole that I have, and then I'll lock that in. I'll do a measurement at position 2. I will then do the same over at position 3. And as I'm doing that, I'm also varying the height an inch or two. So perhaps I will do this one an inch lower, that one an inch higher. Above all, when you're doing the measurement, you never want to obstruct the microphone with the back of your seat. So I'm simulating here that I have a low back couch. I have my theater seat extended. And of course, if you have theater seating, this is not a bad way to do that either for the measurement. So once you do positions 1, 2, and 3, you're gonna do positions 4, 5, and 6. So then I have it marked here where my 45-degree angle is. So then I will do my position 4 here, let's say. And then position 5 is in the middle. I will typically do position 4 a little lower. I'll do position 5 a little higher, and then I'll do position 6 perhaps a little higher or lower depending on what the room looks like. It doesn't really matter, just keep it about an inch or two, slightly varying the height. And if you're saying, gee, how does he do it? Yeah, you're right, I do have to move that a little bit just to get that in the middle. And then when I do my final 2 measurements, 7 and 8, I go to the 45-degree angle mark, so I collapse it a bit. And then I do my measurement here for position 7, and then finally position 8. So that's how you do an Audyssey calibration. Make sure you do the back ones that are higher than the main listening position, and you can vary the height of that. Do not get the temptation and urge to start doing multiple measurements with Audyssey. Even Audyssey recommends you stick to the 8, maximum 10 positions and try to keep your measurements all within 2 feet of the main listening position. You should get really great results. I have to tell you, I do wish Audyssey had a regular microphone like everybody else that we could use a boom arm with. Audyssey does offer their Pro Installer Kit that comes with a calibrated microphone, tripod, and more. This is really an ideal solution for those who need to do long runs and do calibrations with their equipment in a different room. It is a paid upgrade for $550. So if you're not using that contraption that I designed with the dowel or the Pro Installer Kit, then you're gonna wanna get yourself a proper tripod mic and one that has a tilting head. So here I have the Audyssey microphone positioned roughly ear height, and this would be your main listening position. Again, you wanna make sure that that's centered. What you would then do is measure about 20 inches, do not exceed 2 feet, onto the left side for measurement position 2. That 20-inch mark is going to be basically right about here. So then what I would do is I would take the tripod, I would readjust the head, and I would do my measurement position number 2 here. Then I would do measurement position number 3, and then I would do that again about 20 inches, and I would do that position right over here, give or take. This is a little too far, but you get the general idea. Then once you have done that, you have to do positions 4, 5, and 6 in front. So then if you have a nice tripod with legs that extend, you can again extend the legs down. You can do your measurement here. And then as you're making your measurement, the one thing that you do want to make sure is that 4, 5, and 6 are a little bit lower than your main listening position here. So what I'll do is I'll either make 4 and 6 slightly lower and 5 a little higher, or I'll do the reverse. I'll make 4 a little higher, 5 a little bit lower, and then 6 over here. So you measure that, boom, and then you measure that again here for position 6. Then you bring the microphone over behind your seating area. And then this is where you're going to do your positions 7 and 8. So those you want to have higher than your main listening position microphone, which is give or take right about here. No more than 6 inches taller, and again about 20 inches away from where you had the main listening position. That's how you do an Audyssey calibration. Let's talk about Dirac. Dirac gives you a really good 3-dimensional image that gives you a better idea of how all the measurement positions should be. Dirac is going to default to an 11-point measurement. I'm going to specifically talk about the 9 and the 11 right here in the video that's going to follow, and you can obviously do up to the 17 points. So first and foremost, the reference seating position is the most important measurement that you're going to do. You're going to do that right at ear height. I mentioned Dirac has 3 patterns that you can follow. The only difference between them is the number of measurements that you're doing. It doesn't get better the more measurements you do. As a matter of fact, you should probably even start with the smaller, the tightly focused, the 9-point measurement. This is what the 9-point measurement looks like, the tightly focused. Then it shows you in 3 dimensions how those measurements generally should be. You do want to vary the microphone height, however, not make it a perfect cube. And then this is what the regularly focused image looks like. It adds 2 measurement points to either side of the reference seating position. You want to vary those a little bit, as I'll show you in the upcoming video segment in a second. And then finally, you have the 17-point measurement, and that is really for an extra wide row or a very wide couch where you'd consider that. I do want to mention that Storm Audio has come up with an alternative measurement pattern for Dirac. So I've taken the liberty of showing you what that pattern looks like. And what I like about the Storm Audio version is they give you a really good insight into how the varying height should be in 3 dimensions. So it's a perfect pattern. It has a trapezoidal configuration with varying heights at a specific pattern. You may want to give that a try as well as a different profile and see if you get better results in your particular case. So we're going to do a Dirac measurement. I'm going to show you both the 9 and the 11 point. Right now I have this at about 42 inches, which is ear height and also tweeter height in my space. And the first thing that I'll do is I will run a calibration at position number 1. Then the next thing that I will do is I will actually bypass the order that Dirac says. And if I'm doing the 11-point measurement, it wants you to do 2 on this side and 2 on this side. What I'll then do is I'll move the microphone by the width of one of the bases here with the podium. That's about maybe 8, 12 inches or so. And I'll move it over here first, let's say to the left. And then if you'll see, I have my my boom mic marked, and then I'll lower this about 1 inch, maybe 2 inches. I'll do the second measurement, and then I will move it over again about the width of the base, and then I will raise it about 1 inch or 2, so that way it's not exactly at the same height as the main listening position. I'll then do the same thing on the other side. I'll move the microphone over here, and I will select that position in Dirac. And then finally, I'll do the other for the 11-point measurement and place the microphone about there. If you actually measure out, I'm doing no more than about 20 inches, and I strongly recommend do not exceed 2 feet when you're doing your calibration. So if you're doing the 11-point measurement, main listening position plus those 4, then we'll get back to what you would typically do in the 9-point measurement. I will then take my microphone here, and then I'll start and do the lower position. So I'll actually extend the boom mic arm out, and then I will lower it by a couple of inches. Again, I have it marked. And then I'll make sure if I have a high back seat that the microphone is not being eclipsed by the seat height. And then I'll make sure that all my surrounds can see the microphone head. I will then move that to an angle so it is creating a cube eventually, but also it's really an X pattern is what I'm doing. And then I will take the measurement here. So this will be the lower right front. Then I'll move it over and I'll do the lower left front. And then I might vary the height a little bit up or down. Then finally what I'll do to be consistent is I'll take my microphone and then I'll move it behind the seating area. And you can see here that you can just barely see the microphone height. I would do it probably right about there. And then once again, I would take a measurement point here. I'd move the microphone and I would do another measurement point there. And then I raise up the mic stand. And then I put it about 3 to 6 inches above where I have the main listening position. And then I'll do the similar thing, is I will do the listening position here for, let's say, the left, then the right. Then I'll move my stand. And then I'll do the similar thing up here where maybe I'll do it like this, an inch or 2 up, there, an inch or 2 down. So at the end of the Dirac calibration, what I've ended up doing here is I've ended up creating the main listening position. I have for the 11-point measurement, the addition of those 4 measurements, the 2 on each side, and then I've created a cube around the main listening position, varying the heights of those points by a couple of inches. Super simple. That's how you do a proper Dirac calibration. I want to take a point to let you know that Gene Delassalle, Matt Pose, and I had a very good conversation around this. And there's really some good science around the right way to handle room correction with multiple rows. So we're trying to give you a facts-based approach based on just conjecture or something that's anecdotal. So here we go. Number 1, room correction simply is not going to make every seat a money seat. That's about setting expectations again. The room correction physics aren't Star Trek physics, so there's no physics bending, there's no reality distortion that happens in room correction. You have to therefore go with what the software is going to be able to do within the rooms. Even in a movie theater, I don't know if people are often aware of this, that not every seat's the money seat. Typically what they'll do when they EQ a theater is they'll EQ about 1/3 away from the screen, and that's where the EQ happens. Our Audioholics suggestion, and this is what we recommend to you, is that you focus your measurements on the most important row. Where's the money seat? Do that row. That's where you should focus your calibration, and then the other rows will be just fine. Remember, it's all about making a compromise. And don't forget to leverage the power of your room correction solution. Anthem ARC Genesis, Audyssey, and Dirac all support multiple profiles. That means you can create a profile to calibrate for a single listener in a single seat in the reference seating position. Or you can have multiple listeners in a row or multiple row settings and each with its own profile. You can then switch your settings to suit your entertainment session. And remember that Anthem ARC allows you to assign different profiles based on input, while Audyssey Audacity and Dirac require manual switching. So here's an example that if you have a 3-row environment, you could, for example, just pick the money spot, which would typically be the middle row seat, and then you measure from there. If your money seat is in the first row, then you do the measurement there, and then you measure the first row. If you have a 2-row environment, we recommend that you pick the money seat in either of the first or second row. So if it's the second row middle seat, that's where you do your RSP measurement first and measure just that row. If the money seat, the RSP is in the first row, that's where you do your measurement. We are not fans, and we discourage, of doing this middle between row measurement. It just doesn't make a good experience for anyone. Therefore, what we suggest is pick your seat, measure that row, and call it a day. Perhaps you're wondering, what do some of the engineers behind the room correction software say? You should know that we did reach out to the engineering minds behind ARC Genesis and Dirac, and Dirac's perspective differs from our Audioholics recommendation. Dirac's perspective is that the end user should weigh in the aspects of a fully optimized reference seating position versus avoiding overcompensation artifacts that can creep in when you start to measure too large of an area, and that the end user can then consult the various seating arrangements in the Dirac application. And if an end user does want a tight sweet spot in the RSP, then Dirac simply says to use that 9-point measurement tight seating arrangement. Finally, follow the same measurement patterns as you would for a single measurement, with all measurements 2 feet maximum. Again, 2 feet maximum from each other. I recommend doing something a max of about 20 inches, and that's the pattern that I typically do. And to emphasize, we do not advocate adding more measurement points in additional rows to quote unquote make it sound better for everybody. It just doesn't work. I hope you enjoyed this segment and it gave you some insight into how to do proper microphone measurements with room calibration and room correction systems. 2 final points that I want to make before I sign off. Number 1, if you do have a rear wall, which is quite a lot of our enthusiasts, absolutely positively move your measurements forward 3 feet away. Do not get within 3 feet, 1 meter of any room boundary. Even if somebody's sitting in the corner, you don't want to measure that because the reinforcement is so bad, it's going to throw the measurement off so much, it's just going to lead to really bad results. The second thing that I want to convey is don't try to make the room correction do too much. The best results science is starting to show is that when you measure a single row, that tends to provide a pretty darn good experience for everyone. So stick to your main listening position, or what we're now calling the reference position, and that's where you should try to focus in your measurements within that row. Stick within the 20 inches, no more than 24 inches on either side of that reference listening position, and then just do your equidistant measurements. Asking the software to do too much, thinking that more is better, typically isn't. So let us know what your experience has been, what you think of the results once you followed some of these best practices. And above all, remember, it's all about the music and the movies. So keep listening. And don't forget our Patreon channel at patreon.com/audioholics. We appreciate your support. You'll get direct access to us, you can ask questions, and you can even suggest topics for future programs.